Hi, if you are just joining us, and you just are, this is Genius Teatime, and we're talking about food and community food. This is more kind of a communal chat about like what kind of food, and we're talking more about food ethics to start out. And it's like some of the issues that come up around like I don't know, being puritanical about different styles of things and also about being a little super privileged about it, especially since there are a lot of people who do not have the options that you have in the Western world to have options of food
Right.
and how people get taken advantage of all over. We had just been talking about the problems with cashews and how harvesting them is super, super harmful to people. So a lot of people who are like strict vegans who are, touting the benefits of cashews are not actually looking at the actual human cost
Mm-hmm.
of harvesting said cashews. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not that you have to harvest them badly, you can do a better job, but a lot of times you're not. And Heather
Mm-hmm.
Woodbury has been talking about a couple of books. Do you want to hold those up, please?
Yeah. So the first book that I shared with everyone
Essays
was this
Against Everything.
was Essays Against Everything by this guy, Mark. I think you say his name Grief. I'm not sure. I read them the first bit about his essay called On Food. Um, and shall I read it again?
Sure.
Food riots have broken out this year in Haiti, Egypt, Mozambique, and Bangladesh. In New York, 8 million people look into the refrigerator wondering what to eat. Rice prices soar on the international market as shortages trigger unrest among people for whom rice is a dietary staple. The packaging on the rice on my pantry shelf tells a story about pristine fields and rare cultivation. Quote, to keep our rice select, we inspect each grain. This may seem like a lot of extra work to you, but we care, end of quote. And then he goes on to sort of eviscerate how people use the word care. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's this other book that I wanted to share called The Third Plate by Dan Barber. Um, and Shall I just read the blurb on the back to give
Sure.
you
Why
an
not?
idea of it? Today's farm-to-table revolution has a dark secret. The local food movement has failed to change how we eat. It has also offered a false promise for the future of food. In his visionary New York Times bestselling book, Chef Dan Barber offers a radical new way of thinking about food from the ground up. Looking beyond the misguided dining of our past and present, Barber points to a future third plate, a new paradigm of American eating where good farming and good cooking intersect. Barber's Third Plate charts a bright path forward for eaters and chefs alike, daring everyone to imagine a food system that is as sustainable as it is delicious.
Which would be amazing. And we were
Which
also
would be
talking
amazing.
about Michael Pollan's The Omnivore's Dilemma, which is sort of a great
Right.
one to introduce people to food discussions. Um, but also, like with almost everything, I am absolutely not a purist. And I think being that kind of purist culture when it comes to food,
Mm-hmm.
every time you do it in any aspect of it, you're getting into some creepy behavior. Like, first off, it's not necessarily appropriate to say, oh, like, look, you shouldn't be able to say things because it's classist. And it's like, look, if you're actually poisoning an entire group of people by only putting crappy fast food and no grocery areas in their area, you're poisoning them and you're taking advantage. You are. Um, and that's not being classist, that's saying fact of what is available and what isn't in an area. But being purist about what you can and can't eat can be a real issue.
Yeah,
And
I think.
what
Oh, go
is
ahead.
and what is and what is and is not safe about like it's really easy to be very strident about it. It's like, but you got to look at what are the human costs all over about
Mm-hmm.
how, for example, your Beyond Burgers being prepared.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
that can be super bad for the environment. Most conventional farming actually kills a lot. of things, you know? And
Yeah, and
I
what
don't mean taking care of animals. I mean actual plants. Like the amount of damage caused by some of the pesticides and the way that they handle fertilizers and the
mm-hmm,
runoff,
mm-hmm.
it can actually be a serious problem.
Yeah.
And I don't see a lot of people talking about that. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, wow. No, and like, yeah, you can do, I don't know how you do this on a large scale. This is always the problem. Like, but
Yeah.
sometimes some conventional ways of doing things work, and you're feeding a lot more people. And that
Right.
is a real
I
thing. The
this
way that
guy,
we sell things is terrible.
right, you mean in packaging. But like I just want to make one point. This guy also just turned me on to the understanding that a lot of times when I'm buying organic, it might be organically farmed in such a way that I'm not really getting that very many nutrients, because basically he's talking about going back to a form of farming that's that's goes all the way deep, 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 deep down into the roots. And this the sort of science and the folk knowledge about actually how to grow stuff so that you got the chickens going around on the land and shitting and enriching the soil, and you've got this weed and that weed and the other thing growing, and so you've got all these nutrients in the soil so that
Yeah,
when you
grass
eat.
farming.
Yeah, right. Right, which this guy makes fun of, so as being like overly grooming everything to be perfect, when like how do you actually feed billions of people on this planet? So
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to have the perfect be the enemy of the good, but
no, but
you
yeah.
can also it matters to try to raise things like most things conventionally done. Just been reading, oh gosh, I can't remember his name. Somebody who's growing for flavor, Asian guy out of the UK,
Mm-hmm.
but for flavor and nutrients. But that most things that are conventionally produced, or even things that are kind of regularly organically produced, are more produced for ease of transit,
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
how pretty
Yeah,
it is,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
if you sit down with a farmer and talk about their crops, and I had this, because I grew up and have friends who are farmers, they will list all the advantages of all kinds of different crops and varieties and seeds. At no point in the discussion does quality of nutrition or quality of final product or even taste enter into their decision. It's just not considered.
Conventional farmers, you mean?
Yeah, that's
Even
on the farm.
even organic farmers, commercial farmers,
Yeah,
people who are trying to make a living
Right.
farming.
It's so hard to do that. And yeah,
it's genuinely a rough life.
I saw this great guy on a PBS documentary who was like a super um activist farmer, multi-generation farmer. His father had actually committed suicide when
Mm.
his farm was foreclosed on, and he was a real anti-factory farming uh champion, a real pro good way of farming dude, and really connected to this Midwestern communities for many, many, many generations. And he was like really going around trying to get people to vote for politicians who would crack down on factory farming.
Yeah.
And he really thought, and I thought it was a really inspiring document. I mean, he was just one of the people in the documentary, but it was really, really, I wish there was more stuff like that, because I think you could get people involved locally and
There is
statewide. Yeah.
there is a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, but I mean amongst people who voted for fuck shit.
I mean, people are poorly educated about this. They are about I mean, the way we do everything, right?
Yeah.
It's just the next, any angle is going to be a view in to what we're dealing with, which is maxing is a sort of accumulation, a hoarding essentially of resources by very few, and the attempt of few to maximize profit in whatever way they, which in this
Right, and a
is,
lot of farmers have been screwed by that since World War II.
of course, I mean, the economic impacts are obvious, but the impacts on all levels are obvious. The environmental impact, the impact on the food itself, like this, there is no part of our lives that isn't affected by what has happened at the level of legislation, for example, and what's going on economically and how that plays out in the lives, not just of farmers trying to make a living, but in.
But you know of lots of farmers like him all across the United States who are talking to rural people about voting for
There are
people to
people
get
that are
rid of factory farming.
indigenous level farmers, there are smaller farmers kind of all over that have
Right.
been doing
No.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
Doing political
doing,
organizing.
yeah, doing that, that I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I was talking about.
There are a
As-
lot of people doing political organizing around this. I don't think that it gets, I mean, where I live
yes. What
where
I
I live,
was saying I wish there was more of people that are multi-generational farmers doing political organizing about factory farming.
sure.
Yeah, where you live, you were saying, Pamela?
Sorry, what?
You were saying, Pamela, where you live?
I mean, where I live, people don't pay attention to this because most of the people that I know, unless they're permaculture trained or in some other way connected, which I am,
Mm-hmm.
they aren't connecting the dots of like that package of animal, that package of meat in the refrigerated section of your supermarket that's wrapped in plastic came from an animal that was raised,
Yeah,
you know, where and
period.
fed and what conditions, it's like people aren't necessarily thinking about this. And, I say this as someone who's in a community with lots of ethical vegans who I have long taken issue with for sort of outsourcing their guilt about the state
Yeah,
of our food systems to becoming incredibly dogmatic about what it is to eat animal. And I say that as somebody who eats minimal animal.
yeah.
There are
No,
ways to actually look at how the threads connect and to interact with them in a conscious way.
absolutely.
That
Here's-
leads, you pull the thread and the whole sweater starts to unravel. So it's important, I think, for us to look at not just single issues, but the intersection of everything. Because I don't know that there's really any way around it when it comes to talking about food. We can't get into food without getting into farming, which has already happened. We can't get into that without medicine, which has already happened, and into the law, and into who our politicians are, and into the local economies, and
It's every part of it.
the centralization of all of these needs.
Yeah.
Into this kind of resource hoarding model and profit-driven model that we're in across the board in this country.
Yeah.
Here's a good question, perhaps. I don't know if you guys want to try to help answer this.
Put it out.
I go to a left-wing Episcopal church in Echo Park, and
Which one?
St. Athanasius on Echo Park Lake.
Yeah, that's where my shul meets. I'm a walk from there.
Nefesh.
Yeah,
Nefesh. I go to Nefesh on occasion too. I double dip because I'm part I'm part Jewish and I'm part not Jewish. So at any rate, for the longest time at my church, so most of the people in the small English speaking congregation are fairly left-wing, fairly not young, mostly white, not entirely. And then there's a larger Spanish speaking congregation, which I've also over the years been very involved in community things that we do together, and church retreats and whatnot. And so here you come to a really wonderful cross-cultural, cross-class mixing that happens when we all get together and celebrate stuff. And then in both congregations, whenever we eat together, there's, factory farmed meat and styrofoam and plastic. And so my question is, how do I try to talk my church into not doing this, into trying to go at it at another way without, first of all, just being really, for instance, we do a big Thanksgiving, right? And they make and they make 500 turkeys and give them away to people for their Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
So these are really good community things to be doing. And we've also been involved in a lot of feeding of giving people who are homeless, regular meals and all sorts of stuff like that, food banking. So it's just a question to me, because it's first of all, I like the traditional ways in which these foods are prepared, but at the same time, factory farming just seems to me to be a cruel thing to be participating in. Now, I participate in it often when I'm in a cultural situation where I want to participate in the culture. And so and also just because I like to eat meat, I'll just do it. But, anyway, so that there's a question,
Okay.
what do you think about, or what do you think about the question? Is it not necessary to try to get my congregation to do that? Should I just go? For years, I've just sort of gone, okay, well,
Well, it's certainly worth saying to some people that I'd like to try another option some days. But to try to tell people that they're not supposed to do what they are regularly culturally doing, probably not going to fly and probably not appropriate.
I mean, I think there's an educational
mhm.
also.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah, but educational is kind of,
telling people not to do something is never as meaningful as giving them alternatives.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I
giving
think
other
that's,
people an option, a different option, is great.
yeah. The thing is, how can people in a lot of the people in the Spanish congregation couldn't afford to eat meat if they ate local, if they ate meat that wasn't factory farmed.
Yep.
I mean, I think there's something to be said about initiating the conversation and asking them what they think, rather than even starting with a proposal, to just organize a conversation around it.
Totally valid.
What people think and how they feel about it, and to just state that you're feeling troubled by it and that you're curious if you could come up with solutions as a group. I'm really curious, because I said this a second ago, but I have really, really, really cut down on my meat consumption. I still eat some, and I want my kid to have some. And my partner seems to have a body type that needs it. He needs animal proteins to be well. But we are conscientious and sort of limited in how we source our meat. And I think that diminishing of amount, because Americans as a whole, and that includes all of our immigrant communities, all of the traditional foods, all of this, my noticing in America is that everyone has been affected by this kind of norm that you have meat basically every day at every meal, that it's not a complete meal without meat.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's hard to budge something like Thanksgiving because everyone is so focused on the poultry, everyone's focused on the turkey.
Yeah.
But there are certainly good discussions to be had, and I think that's where it has to start, because no one wants to be told. But I think
wasn't proposing to just tell people.
No. I'm not saying that you were, but just to bring something new into a group that's been doing a thing for a certain amount of time, such a way. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would imagine that folks, there's some really good dialogue to be had.
I guess I imagine myself having that dialogue, and I don't know how I would answer the question of how is it even affordable to be a vegetarian and buy healthy, organically and like not just organically, as I've learned, but truly organically farmed, nutritious stuff. Because this guy has turned me on to the fact that there's a theory that people eat, that there's not just an obesity crisis because of people eating processed food, but because they're eating food that's could be maybe they're having a salad and some beans, but there's not enough nutrients in the conventionally farmed salad and beans. So they're eating more and more and more because their body's going, that's not enough. I need some nutrients. That's not enough nutrients for me. And so that you just keep overeating so that you can try to get the nutrients.
Well, I think in Echo Park, where I am also, I just drove from my house in Echo Park to Silver Lake. There's something very real about taking opportunities and then providing opportunities for others to get their hands into the earth and to have a relationship with growing. One of the great things about LA is that, unlike New York City, where I used to live, there is a lot of access to outdoor space. I was involved with community gardens on the Lower East Side too. So we just got it where we could find it, and we all had, window boxes and whatever we could have. But here it's such a sprawl, in part because there is so much access to outdoor space. And I don't know, there's a lot to be said for even beginning to grow even a little bit of food. The Gervais family, I believe, were incredible. They did these tours of their homestead, which was tiny. It was like a quarter of an acre. And they grew pounds of food and took it to farmers market for years. There was a place actually in Lincoln Heights that we've been going to every week to get our farm box, where we get an unbelievable haul of vegetables that they're growing there in Lincoln Heights every week. Avenue 33 Farm.
Oh,
That's so cool.
I'm going to write that down.
That's awesome.
Look them up on the socials. They have an Instagram account, which is incredible. And they're always looking for volunteers. So it's like, I want to start taking my kid there. I have a 9-year-old daughter.
Well, that's amazing.
Avenue 33 Farm.
It's wonderful.
That's terrific. Yeah,
for people who have SNAP cards, for people who have EBT, it's $10 for the farm box.
Wow.
Nice.
Okay, you just gave me an actionable thing. You're reminding me of another book that my scientist, British Columbian friend turned me on to, The Ghost Farm, which is a wonderful book about starting a farm on a field of rubble in Oakland. And it's
so
really
cool.
it's really great. By the end, she's like slaughtering her own pig, and she's like going to Chez Panisse to like dumpster dive for the pig, and then like the Chez Panisse person like teaches her how to smoke pork and everything. And it's hilarious, along with being like a really inspiring book about urban farming. And I think a lot of people in even a dense city like New York City could do a shit ton more of it than is actually being done. I used to know a woman who grew corn on her roof on 42nd Street.
That's awesome.
I mean, what Ron Finley's been doing with them taking back the sidewalk strip for basic growing is such a big thing, and also just so important. I think growing things on your own is an important thing. I think, especially in Los Angeles, one of the things you can do is start getting to know your neighbors and forage fruit, forage things locally, because you can. And a lot of people, well, especially now with the ashes and whatnot, you have to wash it, and you have to wash it carefully. But it's totally edible, and as so much of it goes to waste. So figuring out ways that you can make and preserve things, also a super fun thing to do with kids. Like here, let's make candied peel stuff. Let's do something with the loquats that so many people just dump. I mean, it's a short season, but a terrific jam.
Not that short.
I just learned, why did I not do this before? Frozen cubes of Meyer lemon juice are amazing, and you can just store them in the cubes. I'm like, why have I not been doing this with everything? Because if for anybody who watches this who might be elsewhere in the world, In the New Midwest, you're trying to give away zucchini. In California, you're trying to give away lemons.
Mhm.
You know, um, there are some things that just like anything you can do that finds ways to make things more durable and
Mhm.
lasting, like any ways that you can preserve your food makes an enormous difference and that you can grow. Um, and also, I think recognizing that sometimes you have to make do with what's available. So one of the things that I've had a really hard time in LA doing is getting to people to go in on community shopping. It's super frustrating. Like
Oh,
Costco is there. I cannot use all of the thing,
totally.
right? So can we talk to each other about how we could share that we can split things?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Dave has a restaurant depot card. We can get flats of eggs. People can't get
No, I can't
eggs.
get a flat at Restaurant Depot. I have to get a case.
Okay, see,
How
a
many?
case of eggs.
But how many are?
A case would be uh, a dozen flats, so 288.
How much is a full case?
It varies. I mean, the prices are volatile.
Oh, yeah.
It's about a third the price of per egg of Savons.
So there are ways that you can do that, is all I am saying. That you can actually talk to each other if eggs are something you eat.
Mhm.
Frequently they're not going to have the nicest pasture raised
They're
ones.
not going to have pasture. They're commercial eggs. So like
Right.
I said, the entire modus operandi of Restaurant Depot is to make it as cheap as possible for restaurants.
Right.
Yep.
Now,
But
on the other side of that, if you're eating meat, you can also get an entire halal lamb carcass for $7 a pound.
Right.
You
There
know,
are
it's
food shares though that are focused on regenerative sort of method farming or organic farming.
yeah,
But those won't be. I'm imagining those aren't going to cost the same as Restaurant Depot at all, just because of the volume.
no.
right. But it's
They do.
conventional food.
Yeah, totally.
It's the what is available to you, what are your needs, what can you afford? I mean, I know people like the World Harvest Food Bank, if you're out in the West Adams area, is terrific and a really great resource in Los Angeles. Um, and there are food banks all over, but what you're going to get is probably going to be conventional, and it's quite possibly going to be processed. So being aware that that's one of the options that you have. I mean, it's not impossible to get higher quality goods for less, but you may have to do bulk.
Yeah.
And that is honestly a really good opportunity. Also, if you can, maybe getting some things that are a little bit more local and maybe not try to get them at every time of year. So getting stuff out of season, in particular for produce, is a whole nother thing. It's like if you're getting hothouse grown stuff, it's never going to have the same nutritional value. It's not going to be as good because that's not when it was meant to grow. Tomatoes are meant to grow in the summer. There's a reason they're better then, you know, and just knowing that that's part of what's real and that's part of why people would preserve stuff. And sometimes the frozen stuff is more helpful because it was picked when it was ripe.
Remember the South Central Farm?
Yes, I loved it so much.
Yeah, that was such a great
Yeah.
marriage of what we're talking about. You know, people just doing traditional and ad hoc farming and, you know,
Yeah. And if you
selling the surplus and feeding themselves and
Yeah.
and if you're lucky enough to have good farmers markets around where you are, get to know your farmers. That's one of the other things I think is always get to know the people who supply your eggs. Get to know the people. If you're doing dairy, get to know those people. You're going to end up, you'll find things that you can trust that are going to be better and more. And it's
And
figure
they're
out
not
how. Hmm?
they're not always certified organic because it's expensive.
right. exactly. Yeah.
and know what they're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're doing a good job because it's expensive to get certified organic.
Yeah.
But they may be doing everything shy of that and
Mhm.
have a terrific product that you
Mhm.
will really love and that's going to make everything so much tastier and better for you.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sorry, go on. No.
I'm just oh, I'm just thinking about, the time deficit that a lot of people have. So many people are just whatever class they're in.
Yeah,
They're so overworked. They're
yes.
so exhausted by work and responsibilities that just, I mean, and myself included, often, just pick up the best food I can find quickly. So, it ends up being, some plastic wrap stuff from Trader Joe's or whatever.
Well, I think I don't know. I find it's very important to try not to shame people for what they have to do, right? So this happens a lot with the disability community too, and that people will start shaming people for, say, buying pre-chopped food or pre-prepared stuff. I'm like, look, if you've got arthritis, if your hands aren't working that well, get what you need.
Yeah.
It's cheaper to get the stuff that's pre-chopped and cook it than it is to get nothing or buy
Yeah.
eat out all the time. If what you need is to do it in a crock pot because that's the easiest way for you to prepare things, do it that way.
Well,
Like,
what I love though about your idea of people pooling resources is that you can actually save time and money and eat healthier.
yeah,
You know,
totally.
your neighbor could give you a bunch of frozen chopped vegetables, and you could do something in return that protected your arthritic hands.
Yeah, you can. Who has an Instapot? Who can make, a really good vat of beans? Who can, if you can get to know the people around you, if you can start sharing stuff, you're going to have a way better opportunity because, yeah, only by yourself, it's hard and things go bad.
And this is
So,
by design.
yeah, oh, absolutely. It's designed to make it so that you don't rely on each other, so that
Yes.
you will buy more shit. And that's absolutely what it is. It's like, oh, we're being independent. It's like, no, you're being suckered.
Yeah.
You are totally. One of the things that I love making, I've been posting up different sauces and condiments, for example, that I love making those is they last for a long time, and they make things tasty no matter what you do. And they share really well. So you can
Mm-hmm.
make a vat of chili paste, and a
Oh,
bunch of
okay.
people can have that. Pesto freezes really well. So if you're growing herbs on your sink counter or whatever, because you can do that indoors pretty much anywhere, then you can have something that will last for a while and make something that's really delicious, also that you can share. Makes terrific gifts, makes things easier for other people, and that there are ways to do that that are I don't know. I find that because people are so removed from where their food comes from frequently, that they also don't even value things like making stock. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
one of the simple things, but if you don't have time, that can be an issue. But if you save, for example, if you are eating meat, save all your bones.
Yeah.
Make the most use of it. Boil the crap out of them with water and then save that stuff. You
I
know,
thought I like my experience is that almost everybody in my parents' generation did this sort of stuff habitually, whether they were good cooks or not.
some of them, or some people's grandparents. Like I found that that's kind of skipped some groups of people. Like there was
Well,
a whole
my
group of
my parents
people.
were born in 1925.
Yeah, it depends on when. But I
Anybody,
found,
anybody who went through serious privation will make maximum use of their food.
yeah.
You learn it either the easy way because you're a kid or the hard way because you're starving. And you learn to you just militantly don't waste anything that has value.
But I know a lot of people who grew up with my parents' generation, who are a little later, who felt like that was somehow shameful because it was an admission of poverty
Mhm.
and that it was time that they shouldn't be spending that way, and that's actually it's another way people get you. It's just another way so that you get forced to outsource all of your needs, outsource your care, outsource the people who repair your stuff. Like you can't necessarily do all of it, but it's certainly important to learn how to do some of it because otherwise, yeah, you're getting screwed over
Well, I
a
mean,
lot.
this comes back to, I think, to like convenience culture,
Yeah.
which is meant by design to imitate the life of a person with servants, except it's automated.
Yes.
Like this is such a, it's their gesture to like, well, I don't have to do that. I don't need to know how to do that. I won't be doing that labor for myself. Someone else will be doing that for me, or something else will be
For
doing it.
the little people.
No, it's a way of maximizing your perceived value for your labor.
Exactly. Yes, exactly so.
And that, makes people think that what they're doing is super important and makes sure that you can maximize the resource extraction from their lives.
Totally. But it's
it
like
also, yeah.
people who are spending all of their time and their energy and their lifeblood sitting at a desk, who then take that money to go and buy food that's been processed, prepared, harvested, raised, grown, whatever, packaged by someone else with no sense of how those dots connect is not maximizing anyone's value,
And it's also
No,
super sad. It's just sad, but it ends up devaluing the things that quite literally we need the most. It devalues caretaking, it devalues care for your children and your elders, it devalues your food, and it devalues your cleaning. And like almost any proper business person knows, you are only as good as your dishwasher. Like you will
restaurateur.
be out of everything if your your dishes are not properly cleaned, and everyone gets norovirus.
I People have started doing this with like, B corporation labels and ethically farm labels and all that. But for a long time, I thought it would be great for food to be voluntarily labeled, or any product to be voluntarily labeled with how much the person who was paid the least was paid to produce it.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that with clothing. Like a lot to say about that. But the unfortunate truth is these are really long-standing abuses. With clothing, look, food, clothing, and shelter, like the basic things that we need to live, um, have been people have been abused to make it over and over again. And you know that part of what the plan is with the whole let's round up all of the undesirables is to use them as slave labor. That's all this is. That's all it is. Let's become slavers again.
You really think yeah, well, no, absolutely. Because a lot, a friend of mine quoted her friend as who wasn't white as saying what they're going to do is they're going to do big showy deportations, and then they're not going to get really serious about deporting everyone, because what they want is a completely terrified peon labor force
Yep.
that won't complain about a damn thing.
Well,
Yep.
they want prison labor.
They want prison labor,
Well, prison
which is
labor,
what the for-profit prisons has been. Period.
right? But do you think that like they're going to create like mass concentration camps where they force people to labor?
That's
Yes.
what GeoCamp has been doing. That's
Yeah,
what Geo
Georgia
Group has
tried
been
that.
doing.
Georgia tried that using prison labor to harvest their crops, and it failed.
Badly.
Completely failed.
So tell me more about Geo.
Oh, Geo Group was actually, they were profiting pretty heavily the last go around, thank you, with the camps they were setting up for immigrants.
And what were they producing? What labor were they?
Warehouses at that particular time, but they were trying to start to produce them as prison labor.
What
So
what kind of labor were they doing? What kind of labor
At
were they
least to
profiting
start,
from?
they weren't. At
Oh,
least to
okay.
start, they weren't. And then it was just essentially maintenance of the camps.
Yeah, because I think that, as my friend points out, these people they're so averse to any form of organization, or, they're so averse to actually planning anything, especially as a government entity, that they're going to run into huge logistical nightmare with their deportation plans and their camp plans.
Oh yeah, well, there's no
Yeah.
question about that, but
But
the
that,
amount of abuse that can still happen.
Right. No, actually more abuse in some ways. They're not going to be like the Nazis in that sense, because they're not going to be nearly as efficient as
Yeah,
the
they
Nazis.
don't have the organizational skills.
Well,
Right.
some do, sadly. Some of them do.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
They're a big man. I think there are factions of them that do,
I think
but
that there are
many factions that don't. I mean, I think they're putting a lot of bozos in charge of a lot of government agencies.
that
And
is
then they're also
absolutely
putting
true.
some people who are diametrically opposed to the mission of the agency, who are very intelligent and skilled, who are going to try to dismantle the mission of the agency.
Oh no, and that is the intent.
Yeah.
But with particular camps, that's going to depend entirely on the groups of people, because the for-profit prison system, which I'm
Right.
sure they will be working in, has been
Yeah.
doing this, has been
Right.
doing it for a while. Like
Yeah.
I remember first finding out about this in the 90s and just being livid. And the amount of people who were like, oh, well, it's not a big deal. Like, what is wrong with you? What is actually wrong with you? Um,
I mean, they're really not connecting the dots of what that actually means.
yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, specifically the thing that I'd found out is I was working on something that they were doing a version of King Lear, and they were setting it in Kosovo. And so they're getting a lot of military style stuff. And the problem was the supposedly bulletproof vests had not gotten finished by the prisoners. And I just went, well, first off, there's a bad idea. Speaking as somebody who sews, the sheer amount of ways that you can sabotage a bulletproof vest by doing nothing at all other than nicking the needle. It's super easy to do. And who else would have, would want to sabotage a bulletproof vest but a prisoner? I'm just saying, you're, you're just guaranteeing there's a lot of things that are going to be damaged. But also, what the hell?
Yeah.
And not to mention who ends up being in prison in this culture of ours. Thank you very much. And how absolutely racist and absolutely classist that is, and how
This is
vastly unfair.
This is a direct continuation of plantation slavery.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely that. This was the exception.
Well,
And
it was
so-
actually developed after Reconstruction was abolished,
Yep.
in order to replace it. Yeah, in
Yep.
some ways make it even more punitive.
To maintain slavery, yeah. And so I think that combining that with what Geo Group is doing is not at all, I would not be surprised in any way. Just because they've certainly had time to set up those plans and to talk to the people in, for example, Louisiana, who've been doing this for some time and have prisoners working on everything from Starbucks to Victoria's Secret.
That's right, working in warehouses for the main
Yep,
part.
and processing.
Also working on the phone, which I also think is like, that's a potential for fraud.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I'm gonna give my credit card number to somebody who's really smart, who's doing time.
Yeah.
What was I gonna ask?
I don't know. It's fascinating, right? That we're like, but this covers everything. Food kind of covers all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And runs into
the
all of this.
firefighters.
The firefighters.
Those are a lot of those
Whoa, mama.
prisoners, yeah.
Yeah, it was only recently in California that it was set up so that they could actually get a job once they get out of jail to go
There's
into the
a
firefront.
there's a
Only
whole
recently.
essay. There's a whole essay from a firefighter, a prison firefighter, a prisoner fire incarcerated person firefighter, who was advocating for the program because a lot of what's going on has been remedied, and if you're in prison, the opportunity to serve on a fire line is a huge, huge benefit because you're getting fresher food, you're outside, you're talking with other people you haven't met yet because you're not completely under this the gaze of correctional officers all the time. You're interacting with people on the outside world. It counts. You get paid better than anything you're going to be doing in prison. You're actually getting experience, and at least in California, your record can get expunged so that you can be hired as a firefighter when you get released.
Really?
So
So yeah,
it's that was only recently.
yeah, it's a recent development, but there's a lot of fire programs who said, wait a minute, here's all these guys with a whole lot of wildland fire experience. We need to hire them. And
Right.
if we can't because they're a felon, we need to fix that. And they've found purchase getting their record expunged when they do the fire line work.
Yeah.
So it's being on the fire. They're not actually on the front line. They're tending to be more logistics or mop up or sort of second line work,
Uh-huh.
which is much more manual labor.
Mm-hmm.
But it's manual labor outside. You're in a nicer environment. You don't have a correctional officer hanging over your head all the time. You've got a fire captain who is, not their first job is not to see you as a prisoner, but to see you as a firefighter. There's camaraderie. He was just like going on and on about how, no, I like this. I will take
Okay.
this
Well,
all
I'm
the time.
assuming it's better. It's
Yeah, it's
still
So
it's
could it
still
would
super
it could
crappy.
it be well, could it be possible that people who would be zealous in outlawing prisoners being coerced into labor might uh in an act of thinking of do-gooding screw guys like that?
First of all, none of the firefighters are coerced. You have to volunteer, and you have to be chosen for it because it is a huge perk.
But I've read articles where people say, but they're in prison, so that's a form of coercion.
Yes, they are coerced by being offered something better and nice in a really shitty environment. Are you not going to offer a prisoner something nicer?
I
Yeah,
I'm
Right.
completely
I think
convinced
that's
that it's what you're saying is true. I just
I think that argument that they're doing, that every time you offer a prisoner something, they're not making a completely informed decision, is accurate and totally misguided.
I just think that a lot of our conversation has also been about this purity testing
Right.
that can
yeah. I don't.
that can get rid of a lot of things that are good ideas or stop them from even being presented as good ideas because the person who presents them as good idea gets slapped really hard
Right.
for
That's the
saying
same
something.
manipulative propaganda bullshit that all sides do when they don't really have uh, a completely valid argument, and they're trying to convince themselves as well as anything else, and they're trying to pull the purity card out of, I'm better than you because I am more pure than you on whatever way. All sides are doing that. With the prisoner issue, prison's a crappy place. You'll do almost anything to improve it in any small way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just true.
But also what is also true is what Laura's talking about, which is exploiting people's labor
Right.
in prison.
And putting them, and quite
you know,
literally putting them into a situation where they are very easily going to die or die much earlier because of what they are breathing in. So in some ways, I am not saying shouldn't be an option. I'm saying it's useful to look at that, and that's also deeply sketchy. But so
Yeah, it
much of
is.
this
It's
is,
a sketchy thing to make prisoners work, but you always make prisoners work, and you always pay them shit.
well, at least certainly
Um,
that's what we've done for
that's what
a
we've done. I
long,
mean,
long time. And we didn't,
so I
yeah.
mean,
But
And speaking,
to make it, I think, something that's happening on a wide scale right now that is really, uh, dangerous is, the for-profit the for-profit industry has just grown and grown and grown and grown and grown.
yeah.
yes, that is a
I mean,
problem.
to my point, it was happening directly after the abolition of Reconstruction.
Oh,
So
yeah. No, this
it's
is a
not
very
new.
old process.
Yeah,
This is
it's
not
not
news.
new, but the sort of corporate slickification of it is kind of new.
That's a great word for it. But yeah, the let's put lipstick on that pig, as they say.
Yeah, but I mean, to Dave's point, yeah, there could be positive, even rehabilitative
Well, there could be
aspects.
value,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. Sometimes when people get to both sides, I have this too. I've seen this. The purity culture and the both sidism sometimes are just excuses for people not to make changes.
Girl.
Just real talk. You're like, let's just argue around it so we don't have to do anything. Awesome.
Right. Well, I mean, I was listening to Mark Elias have a really great conversation, democracy docket lawyer,
Okay.
the guy who's like sued in like all 50 states over and over again to stop voter suppression. The guy who's won like countless lawsuits, democracy
Nice.
doc dude. And he was having conversation with Politics Girl podcast. Very, very excellent interlocutor. And he was just saying how, what's going on right now is an opportunity also for everyone who's opposed to fascism to realize that we're together in this, and also and to just express ideas freely.
Yep.
To just go, here's a problem, here's some ideas, and
Yep.
just sort of trust that bad ideas are going to fall by the wayside, and maybe some good ideas we can try. And they don't have to necessarily have any ideology attached, or they don't have to be judged to have the wrong ideology, and therefore we can't actually think about doing them. Let's just look at them on a practical level, and on the level of like, is that kind and ethical, and just see like, will that work? Let's try it.
That sounds like a pretty good plan to me. Right? I am going to have another Zoom meeting because it's just that kind of day.
I'm
Coming
gonna have
right
something to eat.
up. But this was really lovely. Thank you all for talking about this. I love this, by the way, because look, if we're really getting into any topic seriously, there's so many layers and they cover so many things. And that's one of the reasons why Genius Tea Time is pretty awesome. So thank you all for doing this. Mwah. Have a good night.